Hello, and welcome to Mastering the Mix. I'm ill.Gates, and for the next 12 weeks, we're going to focus entirely on mixing and mastering your music and making it way better because it will sound nice on every sound system. And that's what we want as producers. So let's go. Let's start by laying some groundwork here, getting ready for the magic trick of making your mix better. So why do this course? Why use all this weird medieval / Renaissance artwork? Why? Dave Tiffer once told me, why? The only question worth asking. And that's really stayed with me. So I'm going to start by asking why. So why Heronomous Bosch? What's up with these weird paintings, especially the cover art for the course? It's pretty strange. Dylan, what's the deal with that, you might be saying? Well, Heronomous van Aken was an artist born in Hertogenbosch in Holland, aka the Netherlands. And he lived in 1450 to 1516, which is the early Renaissance period, shortly after the Black Death ravaged Europe. He is very interesting as an early Renaissance painter, and his artwork is like right at the beginning of a total explosion and change in the culture. And the art, or the world of art, as you will see, got new dimension in the Renaissance. Artists started using perspective and atmospheric effects and painting more like a camera sees. And by exploring these images, you're going to get really cool visual examples that will help you mix. So, Bosch is from Hertogenbosch. He adopted a shortened version of his town as his name, which is a thing people do sometimes. And he was a real religious weirdo. He was in a Christian, I guess, cult or cult adjacent organization called the Illustrious Brotherhood of Our Blessed Lady. And a lot of his work dealt with Christian themes and hell and the apocalypse and stuff because, I mean, he just lived through the Black Death. Pretty weird time. So he thought hell was real. He hated polyphonic music, and many of his depictions of hell are depictions of a weird, surreal, music-related hellscape. And I mean, what could be more perfect for illustrating, the fate of people who are learning to mix? Well, I'll make it not hell for you, and we can have a chuckle at all the weird demons along the way. So, Hieronymus Bosch hated polyphony and thought hell was real. I don't think those things. And, I'm not saying that you're going to hell if you believe differently than Hieronymus Bosch did. I don't share many of his beliefs. I just think his art is cool, really, because he was an OG surrealist before surrealism was even a thing. Like, these were by far the weirdest paintings anyone had ever painted when they came out. And that's not nothing. So these vivid images are going to serve as mnemonic aids throughout the course and help you remember some of these concepts and kind of like anchor them in your memory. Plus, I just like his weird ass paintings, you know? Like, I don't know, he probably would think I was going to hell and not like me, but I think he's cool, even if he is a bit of a weirdo. So that's why. All right, but more importantly, why do this course? Well, there's this amazing moment in Alice in Wonderland where Alice is getting her bearings down the rabbit hole, and she asks the Cheshire Cat which road she should take. And the Cheshire Cat says, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there," which is very true. It's very true. So this is what happens when you just target trying to be good, right? Good is like this vague idea that a lot of people have kicking around in their head. And it honestly does a great deal of harm when you're trying to learn anything because it's not really defined enough to serve as a target you can aim for. And without a destination, paths just become like aimless, right? So our goals here in a more specific way are to define your musical style and brand, number one, you got to start with that. Okay. Because that vision will tell you what works and doesn't work, what's right or wrong, et cetera, as we go through the course. And if you want to make cool art of any kind, I strongly encourage you to think carefully about what you're even trying to do and define that as specifically as possible. Because while it's not impossible to hit targets you're not aiming for, your odds of hitting targets go way up when you're aiming for them. Okay? So get clear on your style. That's going to help inform the whole process. Then we're going to curate some style specific reference material that you're going to use to be able to judge, like how loud should a kick be in this style of music? How loud should a snare be? Should there be snares? How loud are vocals? What, like what are the rules? What are the conventions? Which so and until you know what those are within the little island of culture that is your music genre, you won't be able to break rules like an artist. A child breaks rules by an accident, but an artist breaks rules on purpose. And to know which rules you're breaking and why is very important if you want to break rules like an artist. So you're going to need to curate some style specific references that you're going to use to provide kind of like a sense of space and place in the shared cultural landscape of music. Then we're going to develop fundamental understanding of the concepts and techniques involved in mixing. And I'm going to teach you how to mix even when you don't really know what you're doing. And we're going to identify and solve fundamental problems using these fundamental techniques. And as you explore these techniques, you're going to realize that there is so much more to even the most basic functions of your music production software, and that you can solve a lot of the problems that you have by not doing things. People think that you need something else, you need to add something to solve your problems. But if you've watched Why Your Mixing Sucks, you'll understand that it's not a lack of tools, but misuse that is at the core of nearly all problems that music producers and mixing engineers face. So, using only the most bare bones fundamental tools, we're going to show just how powerful they are. You'll be mixing music using a fraction of the tool set available until you can get comfortable and get used to being a ruthless minimalist, because that is something that timeless mixes. It's a quality of timeless mixes is a ruthless minimalism. So we're going to solve our fundamental problems with a minimalist tool set, and then we're going to develop advanced understanding and identify style-specific advanced problems and use advanced solutions for those. But first, we got to cover the fundamentals. And by the end, you will have developed an expressive sonic signature as a mixing engineer, not just as a producer, but as a mixing engineer. And it's my hope that through what you learn in this course, you will begin to approach mixing in a more creative and thereby more fulfilling way. So that's why. All right, so let's talk about style. It all starts and ends with style. So, who are you? Asks the caterpillar of Alice. Well, check it out. Musicians, when they hear music, they typically hear tools, techniques that they've learned about. That's what they're interested in. And when you approach music as something that you should learn about and study, when you're hearing new music, you tend to compare it to the things you know. That's how musicians hear. They're like, hey, what tools and techniques are being used here? Does this represent an innovation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And, that's a little different than the way a fan hears. Fans hear style, they hear vibe, they hear emotion, and they hear lyrics, right? So does that mean fans are dumb? No, they're just using your music differently. Each fan and musician, they're both asking the same thing. What does this music say about me? How does this music express me? right? Making music is an artist's self-expression, but choosing music is a fan's self-expression, right? Fans blare music going down the street in their car with their windows open so that you can know that they're the kind of person who blares that kind of music going down the street in a car with the windows open, right? It says something. The music that people love the most can be used in place of a personality on their bio on social media, right? People do that all the time. Choosing music is an inherently expressive and creative act to a fan, right? And it's important to remember that because that's why they're listening to your music beyond just like purpose specific playlists. That's why they're listening. It's a tool for their self expression. You are giving voice to their inner vision and their creative passions, right? So, music, therefore, can be thought of as audio fashion. And I would encourage you to think of it as audio fashion because it will make a lot more sense if you do so. So, your style is a way of telling us who you are as a person without using words, right? And when artists have no style, it is hard not to feel that however much virtuosity and skill they may possess, without style, you wonder what they're hiding. You wonder who they are, and you have trouble connecting with it. Okay, because style is a wordless communication, a wordless self expression going to the meta level beyond just the lyrics. It is the language of style is universal. Okay, so you must clearly define this target as soon as possible because it will inform the entire rest of this process. Okay. So, the process itself, to review, there are 5 phases of song creation. First, at the bottom of the illustration there, you'll see the super loop phase. And this you're probably familiar with. You jam and brainstorm and try different things, saying yes to everything until you have too many good ideas and one best idea. Then you take that one best idea and you let that be the lead as you give it what it needs and arrange the rest of the song. Duplicating your loop out to fill the arrangement and then subtracting is a typical way to do it, but there are as many ways to arrange as there are producers to do it. These are just kind of like general guidelines and trends that I notice in the way people tend to work. So this is not like you have to work this way, but this is just a way to think about how people work. So people will typically jam over a loop, then arrange it out, duplicating the loop to fill the arrangement and subtracting, bringing parts in and out to create the arrangement. And if you've tried to finish a track at this stage and gotten frustrated by your computer processor being overloaded and things just becoming unwieldy and etc., getting frustrated, eventually abandoning a project, well, that's because you didn't do this next step. Phase 3, which is where you go to stems and essentially remix those stems as a way to solve problems like transitions, build-ups, dance flow, sometimes sound design. Sometimes you'll remake whole channels in this mode, but the audio editing remix style manipulations that you can perform only on rendered stems are extremely useful finishing tracks. And when you go to stems, which are just like audio renders of the separate channels, you get all of your processor CPU back, and you can then have at it with all of your best plugins and have no latency and have everything working perfectly. And that's just where you want to be when you're working. It's way easier to finish a song if you think of this stage as like remixing your own stems to finish the track. And then after that stage, that's when you go to stems again and mix it. And mixing is a longer process, usually where you test on different sound systems, test on headphones, test in the car, test, make notes, come back, fix it, test, make notes, come back, fix it, etc., until there are no more notes to make. Everywhere you listen to it, it sounds as it should, and you feel good. That part, that's like mixing as such, right? You're starting with stems of a finished song, and you're testing them lots of places, taking notes and fixing it. That's really how you should think about the mixing process as such, okay? It's a process of testing for translation once a track is finished and doing high fidelity manipulations to the stems to finish it up. And then there is another stage that, if necessary, can be important. If you're, for example, putting out an album and you want all the tracks to feel consistent across the album, you may want to master them all in one big session where you can A/B compare them to each other and make sure that they make sense as an album. So sometimes you need to adjust your final output files there. A lot of people turn their final output files down -1 dB so that any overs generated in the MP3 encoding process when, SoundCloud or Spotify or any other service encodes your final wave into their MP3, you sometimes get these little blips of data that can cause loudness penalties and make them render your song quieter. So usually most people will at least turn it down -1 dB. But oftentimes, especially in the old days, people would hire a professional mastering engineer with a bunch of usually analog equipment in a fancy treated room to do the testing part that should be in the mix part. That a lot of the time people would kind of assume a mastering engineer would do that, and that they would test and test and test until it sounds right everywhere. And a lot of the time when you get like a remastered movie, for example, or a remastered album, people will say remastered, but actually they're remixing it. They're just like doing the mix again, but there's already a word for remix, so they say remastered. But a lot of the time remastering is actually going back to that mix stage where you have the separate channels, testing on different sound systems, making notes, and fixing it, okay? So that's those last two phases, this mixing and mastering and testing and finalizing and getting everything like professional sounding, polished, loud, punchy, clean, all the levels right, everything feels like it should, etc. That's what we're doing in this course. If you want to learn the other phases of production, you should check out the Producer's Path or the Crucible. But if you want to learn mixing and mastering and spend 12 weeks going super deep on it so that your music sounds amazing forever after, this is that course. All right, cool. So included in the course is a great deal of material in the course library. There's Why Your Mixing Sucks, which is a very cheeky presentation I did that will help you address the kind of common critical points of failure that are near universal among producers. So if any of the things in there are you, don't feel called out. They're me too. They're every other producer. We all go through it. Share the blame, bear no shame. All right. And then composing the mix is another course about the relationship of mixing, composition, and sound design. And this is, again, like just like a one-shot quickie workshop. It's basically like one of the classes in this course, but it's all about understanding how mixing, composition, and sound design work together. And because there are certain things that there's certain basic composition mistakes that if you're making those mistakes, there's no way in hell your music's gonna sound good no matter how much you try and mix it. So this is, again, solving common problems, composition. But if you have issues with composition and clutter, that's your jam. And then it also shares a few sound design tricks and stuff. But yeah, I thought it would be cool to include it, so in it goes. And then the 80/20 of mixing is all the stuff that I wish I knew about mixing right away. Gives you the big picture, but in a lot less detail than this course. However, if you want like a kind of quick overview of the big picture that you could like put on like a podcast or whatever while you're doing the dishes and listen to, the 80/20 of mixing is pretty good. That was a very popular video in Dojo, and it's a good like quick one-shot big picture. Then I've also included a collection of ill.Gates mixing racks. These are all kinds of racks for all different purposes. You can poke around and have a look. The names make it fairly obvious what they do, and you'll see some of them come into play later. Same thing with the ill.Gates one knob racks. These are like my go-to bread and butter racks that I use in every track when I just need like a quick low pass, or I need to, do an effect sweep of some kind. But then there's also a bunch of mixing racks in there. And as you'll see, there's definitely room to get your hands a little bit dirty and start getting creative with mixing. And we will get into some more creative mixing assignments once we get the dry mix down. So yeah, then those one knob racks will be a lot of fun. And there is a bunch more other stuff to come, like templates and other racks and things, but they're going to be in the individual weeks because I don't want you getting too crazy before we've even got to it. So then online, there's a bunch of free resources that I want to bring your attention to that, I mean, I want to scream these from the mountaintops. I wish everybody knew about them. So if you are entirely new to making music, or if you know anyone entirely new to make music, Ableton has this awesome website called Learning Music, where it's like lessons that are also a web-based DAW, and you can like kind of use a simplified version of Ableton in the actual web browser as it teaches you, and it teaches you all the basic concepts of music in a really elegant and fun way. And it's like, it's one of the best educational resources I've seen. And likewise, the Ableton YouTube channel is amazing, but they don't game the algorithm or like, rage bait people. Like there's no why your mixing sucks on the Ableton channel. They're way too classy for that. So they don't get much love in the algorithm. And but their videos are amazing and you should check them out for, basic essential topics in Ableton. There is nothing better. They're short, they're to the point. I mean, they're a bit dry and like pro, but they're really clean. And I can't imagine a better resource for what that is. If I use a music word, you don't know what it is, you want to know what it is, there's a music glossary there. You can look it up. Same thing with production. If I use a production term, you don't know what it is. Like you're like, what's the difference between RMS and LUFS? The slide explained it, but I want more detail. Well, that's where you go to get more detail. If you want plugins, there's a rabbit hole for you. 3,000 free plugins. Watch out. And if you need analog emulations, and I'm telling you right now, you do need analog emulations. You're going to love using them. They're so fun. Go check out this guy, Analog Obsession, who codes freeware clones of a lot of really famous classic compressors and channel strips and distortions and stuff. They're really nice, really nice. And you'll see as we go through the rest of the course, you'll see why it matters. If you need samples, Freesound Project has all the samples you can handle. It's awesome. If you need stems, and you will need stems, there's a library of multitracks hosted by Cambridge that you can check out, and they have all kinds of multitracks for every genre of music, and you're free to download them and practice mixing on them. Awesome. If you need sensei sessions and you want to have some like one-on-one coaching through this, email support@producerdojo.com and we'll set you up with one of our awesome senseis. And because I think everybody needs to read this book, you should read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I've linked a YouTube audio book of it, and it's fantastic. I mean, the real audio book, like you can check it out on Spotify too, and they have like Rick Rubin narrating it. The one on YouTube is like, I think, a CG or a AI narrator, but it's just such a great book. Like, just read it. It's good for your brain and your creativity. All right. So those are all of our resources. Should have everything that you need. Now let's talk about your first assignment. Your first assignment is to write a letter to yourself in the future. The future. The future. Yes, write yourself a letter to be opened at the end of the course and not before. In this letter, thank yourself for doing the work because there's work in this course. It's 12 weeks. It's worth it, but it is work. It's not nothing. So thank yourself. Thank yourself. It'll be great to read it later when you're done. Refer to the course as finished and refer to the course in the past tense when you write. You're writing to be opened after you finish the course and only after you finish the course. So the letter will hit way harder if you write everything in the past tense as though you had already finished the course. And tell yourself in as much detail why you're grateful that you took the time and energy to keep it real to your dreams and like, put your money where your mouth is and, humble yourself and learn. It's like, it's important. It takes open mind and a sustained effort to do a course like this. So, I mean, it's fun too, and it's worth it, but tell yourself why you're grateful. And this will really help you with defining your style and getting clear about your style. I want you to describe as vividly as you can the way your music now sounds at the end of the course and say it as though it is something that has happened and is real. And you'll find as you write using that tense, it makes it more vivid in your imagination and it makes it easier to like clearly visualize the style that you're going for when you're referring to it as something that already exists. I don't know why this is true, but it is. And these kinds of exercises where you're doing things like this, like writing about the future in the past tense, they do have a profound psychological effect. I don't know that knowing why is above my pay grade of psychology. I'm like definitely squarely in the armchair psychologist, not a professional psychologist. And then I want you to talk about what possibilities there are for you now that you have mastered the mix, now that you've got your music sounding good. What's next? You know, that was objective number one for a really long time. What happens when you've got to cross off the list? Then what? Right? So get yourself excited about those possibilities. In short, stoke yourself out. Make this a fun read for yourself. Like this is just for you. Okay. You're never going to show this to anyone. No one's ever going to see this. You can write about anything else you want to, change the exercise in any way you want. Just, just write yourself a cool letter to open at the end that is expressing gratitude. And while doing that, refer to the music that you have mixed in the past tense. And I'm telling you, it will make the course better and it will make things more clear for you, make your vision more clear. So then address it, seal it, and save it for later. Some people like putting it in front of their computer monitor, sealed, so that it can be a reminder to finish the course. You know, having these kind of visual reminders and like talismans and stuff in your immediate working environment does have an effect. So some people do that too. And I think that this will be. It doesn't have to be long. It can just be one page, quick little note, but it's for you, you know? Make it cool because it really like I know people who like read these letters and like cry at the end of the course. Like they're just like, this is the greatest thing that has happened. I feel so good. So really like write all the things that you want to hear and write all the props that you've earned, all the thank yous, because you will have earned it by the end of the course. This is 12 levels of work. And the homework isn't as intense as some courses, like the Crucible. It's not going to be as intense as that, but it is a 12-week course. Like it's a linear course. It takes a commitment. So, and in doing this letter, you will be reinforcing your commitment to your path on this course. You know, you paid for it. You want to get your money's worth by doing it, right? So this will help. All right. Now we're going to talk about referencing. Referencing is absolutely crucial. And most people who suck at mixing for a really long time, not referencing is why they still suck. Okay? So please take this seriously. All right. So context is everything in music, as is illustrated by Heronomous Bosch's painting of a man playing a recorder with his butt, and the guy next to him really doesn't like it. That's not a context I would want my music to appear in. I don't know about you. I don't want anyone playing my music with recorders with their butt in hell or whatever. I don't know. I mean, come on. What's not to like? This is hilarious. I love these images. So music is subjective, of course. You know, what sounds good to one person sounds bad to another. What sounds bad today sounds good tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But while that is true, music is always heard in a context. And there can be things said of it that are true in that context, right? So saying music is subjective is not like a nothing means anything. There are no values that have like without objective anchor points of values, nothing means anything. That is not, that's not like that's using music as subjective as a cop out. Okay. Like, yeah, music is subjective, but in certain contexts and relative to that context, things can be right or wrong, but you have to establish what that context is before you can work with it. So number one, that context is various playback systems. Your music's going to sound real different on a Bluetooth speaker at the beach than on headphones, than on, our crappy PA system at work, and they're like the speakers like buzzing like busted PA playing like crappy pop music. That's actually, there are times when that can be a very educational listening experience. Like listening to your music on half broken sound systems can be very informative. There are times when there are problems that you can only identify on a broken speaker system, and the problems are nonetheless real. But various playback systems. People are going to listen to music on all different playback systems, and it's not always going to appear as the track number on your album. Like track number 6 on your album might appear after track number 5, but it also might play after track number 8 sometimes. You never know. Your album might be on shuffle, or your track might be mixed into another set of songs in a playlist, or it might be like layered with vocals that you didn't compose in someone's DJ set or something, right? Your song is going to appear amongst other songs, and there's an extent to which you can influence that, but creative works have a life of their own when they leave the nest. So, and then there's also, of course, the context of like, is it in a film? Is it being played at a bar? Is it being played when it's sexy time? Is it being played at a funeral? These are all very different contexts that can change the way people approach your music. And sometimes writing music that is very specifically for a specific context can be a great way for it to take off. Like my most powerfully viral song of all time that has sustained virality for like 10 years is my track More Tea, because it is very specifically about drinking tea with your friends. And because there are not very many songs about drinking tea with your friends, and that song is so explicitly about drinking tea with your friends, that song it has a life of its own. And with almost no promotion, it's got over 1 million plays and has eclipsed many songs that I worked hard to promote. So yeah, songs have a life of their own. All right. So making music within these contexts, it can have, closer to objective meanings. And that means that you need to make some playlists so you can do what I call context calibration, right? You want to calibrate your ears to your sound system, and you want to calibrate your song to other songs that it's likely to share a playlist with. So, the first playlist you're going to make is your all genre, all time playlist. And songs on the all genre, all time playlist are curated by familiarity, right? These are songs you've heard everywhere for years. They may not be your favorite songs in the world, but because your ears know them and know them from all these different contexts, you can use them to understand how one sound system differs from another sound system. And this is very important if you are traveling, especially for me, like for DJing. When I DJ at a gig, at soundcheck, I always play a piece of music that is old that I've like known a long time to see how the PA sounds. And I remember when I was on tour with Excision in like 2014, and he has like some very Canadian sound guys, PK Crew, PK Sound. They're very Canadian, really great company, great speakers, and they're kind of like the standard for bass music in North America, at least bass music that goes boom. And I remember we were playing in Dallas, Texas, and the sound team during soundcheck played this like ridiculous Canadian folk song by a man named Stompin' Tom Connors called "The Good Old Hockey Game," and it goes, "The good old hockey game is the best game you can name. And the best game you can name is the good old hockey game." And I remember all this like Dallas bar staff just looking around going, what is happening right now with this song playing at like 100,000 watts of sound? And I thought they were trying to be funny, but then I realized that they are hockey fans. And if you're a hockey fan, they play that song at every single hockey game because, again, extremely specific context. That song is very clearly designed to be played at hockey games, right? So, of course, it's like it's a hit forever, right? But that song they'd heard in tons of arenas playing hockey and going to hockey games for their whole life. So when it comes to a big venue, they know how that song should sound. And knowing like calibrating for bass is one thing, but calibrating for the rest of the fidelity of the sound system, having something you're really familiar with helps. So So even though those guys, I never heard them listen to Stomping Tom Connors outside of that context, the fact of their familiarity with it and in that listening environment was what made it work. All right, so then your other playlists, you want to make style specific playlists that are going to be like relevant to the music genre or subgenre that you're trying to make. These are typically more current. These are someones you'd be likely to share a playlist with, and you're going to use these to adjust your levels, the spectrum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about acoustic treatment and recording studios. So your head and speakers should form a roughly equilateral triangle, equal on all three sides. Then I find that rooms sound best when your speakers are not like smushed up against the back wall. You want your listening position to be like a golden ratio or roughly one third of the way into the room so that you have some distance between your speakers and the back wall as well, because the reflections, when the speakers are really close to the back wall, the reflections can be a lot. So the direct sound, as illustrated in white, those white arrows pointing at the skull, that's what you want. Direct sound is good. You want the right speaker going directly into your right ear. You want the left speaker going directly into your left ear. That's what you want. What you don't want is indirect sound. And you'll see the indirect sound is illustrated in red, bouncing off of the walls on its way towards the listening skull person, right? So you want to block the red sound, but allow the white sound. So that means that we need to treat our primary reflection points. And you can identify these with a hand mirror. If you or someone else basically reaches out, puts your mirror on the wall, and then moves it until you can see the center of the opposite speaker cone reflected on the opposite wall. So you want to see, the reflection of the left speaker cone on the right wall and the reflection of the right speaker cone on the left wall. Well, the uh, angles are equal going back and forth, like as it bounces off like a pool ball or whatever. So that spot where the visual angle is equal, that's the exact same spot for the audio angle. And that's where you center your acoustic absorber panels to treat those primary reflection points. And whether you have absorber panels or moving blankets or staple gun a duvet to your wall, whatever you do, that's where you do it. And you want those things to absorb sound. So things that are heavy, like, old couch cushions, duvets, etc. And acoustic treatment is literally just blocks of sound insulation that you get at Home Depot with like a wood frame and then a canvas over the front. That's all acoustic treatment is. If you have tools, you can make it yourself, way cheaper than ordering it on the internet. And shipping it's a nightmare because it's all heavy. But yeah, anything at those points is better than bare walls. Okay. Now, when you're in an empty room, like let's say you're moving into your new house or apartment and you come in there and it's completely empty, no furniture, you ever notice how there's that like sharp ringing sound in the room? Well, that is called a standing wave, and that's caused by parallel surfaces. The sound is bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, again and again and again. And the length of the room is like the length of the wave, the standing wave that makes. It's going to be tuned, resonating at the wavelength of the room. And you want to disrupt that with diffusers. So that's when you see people with like their kind of egg carton looking stuff, where its job is to like scatter the sound waves and interrupt those standing waves. And not so fun fact, yes, you get standing waves between walls, but you also get standing waves between floor and ceiling. So if you can, getting some kind of carpet in a studio makes a huge difference. Any kind of carpet or rug. And if you want to maintain a hardwood floor, I like hardwood floors because I like wheelie chairs. I will staple gun acoustic treatment to the ceiling. And usually my studios will have acoustic treatment throughout the ceiling to interrupt the parallel surface between floor and ceiling. Then yeah, the diffusers, those are like the eggshell looking guys. They scatter the ringing. And then corners are where the bass piles up and gets weird. And if you have like heavy objects that absorb a lot of sound, that is a bass trap. And you put those in the corners. I almost always have bass traps in the corners. A couch is an excellent bass trap. So having a couch or like a futon, that futon that sucks so much when you're moving, please put it in your studio. It is the perfect thing for sound. It just soaks it up. right? So you want to interrupt parallel surfaces, treat your primary reflections, and do something to the floor and ceiling if you can. And then if you notice anywhere that's ringing, interrupt that with diffusers if you can. But also, like, even just having a painting, I know a lot of people that will take like paintings and like put like heavy stuff in the back of them to may turn them into absorbers, because that's what acoustic treatment is, right? It's like a frame with a piece of insulation and a canvas on the front. Well, a painting is canvas and a frame, so put some insulation on the back and you can turn your artwork into acoustic artwork, right? But yeah, so you don't have to do this perfectly. You don't have to invest tens of thousands of dollars, etc. But just do something. Just do something this week and start thinking about making it better over time. But do something this week. That's your homework, okay? So now I want to talk about A-Bing, because A-Bing is how you check against references, how you reference. So you can see here, there's the sketch and the final artwork in this Heronomous Bosch painting with these like weird like cat demons. And then I think one of them's playing a trumpet with their butt. I don't know. There's a lot of butt trumpets in Heronomous Bosch artwork. So anyway, but that is illustrating that you must match two things before you can A/B between them. And that's because your ears normally just prefer the louder option. They'll take the louder of the two. So to A/B compare, your levels have to match. Okay, your levels have to match to A/B compare, and you probably going to want to load about 5 reference tracks into each mix and have the channels be muted by default, so that you can A/B by just clicking solo on that channel, and then it'll interrupt the mix and play only that channel. And then when you undo solo, you're listening to the mix again. That's a very simple, very effective monitoring setup. And if you have master tracks in there at 0 or a -1, you need your mix to be as loud as that. And if you have any master effects, you must make sure that your reference tracks are not getting the master effects, because, like, let's say you're mixing into a limiter, or you've got like a utility doing a boost, or you're making the sub mono or whatever. Any of that processing is going to change the mastered track that you're listening to as a reference, and it's going to mess it up. So a lot of DAWs will let you route directly to the outputs and bypass the master bus or the main outs. So it's a really good idea to do that, because it ruins A/Bing if you don't. And then when you have them at the matched levels, you want to, when you're deciding how loud a kick should be, well, look how loud it is on the levels in your reference track and match yours to that. Okay. If you're mixing into either like by clipping the master bus and having the peaks but not RMS go over the master bus, then you can match level for level with your references. And as you match level for level with your references, you're likely to push your mix slightly into the red. Peaks over are fine. Any peak, like if they're short peaks, your ears don't really hear that fast, and it's usually undetectable. But when you cross the RMS level, which is like the lower of the two, like in most VU meters or volume meters, there'll be two levels. There'll be like a brighter level that represents the RMS, and then a darker level that goes higher that represents the peak. Right. And it's that second level, the RMS level. That's the one you really got to watch crossing the red, because then you don't start making square waves on your sub and stuff, and it doesn't sound good. But peaks, a little bit in the red or clipping is fine. Surprisingly, doesn't seem like it would be fine. It totally is. So visualizers are another important part of this. They help you notice stuff and things. And ideally, you want to be metering your audio interface's physical outputs. Right. So the top option there, that is doing that. And then I believe you can do that with the bottom option, which is mini meters, as we'll get into it. But this is so that you're metering, you can A/B between a YouTube video and the track you're working on in Ableton without having to download the YouTube video, turn it into an MP3 or whatever, load it into Ableton, bypass the master, A/B, etc. Like, it's really nice to just have that device that's doing the metering in your interface. And some interfaces will have that. If you have a Motu or Mark of the Unicorn, I love that that's their name. If you have a Motu interface, the Motu interfaces, they have that built in, and it's awesome. Okay, so, but yeah, you That's ideal, and if you can't do that, you can kinda get around it by making, like, a pre-master bus where all of your master bus effects are on it, and then have that just set to 0 dB, and then have it go to the master. So you can kinda get around it if you can't find a way to, have it check your audio interface, but the ones that I recommend here, 2 out of the 3 will do that. So, the ones that I recommend are oh, yeah, so first of all, there's levels being measured. There's peak levels, which shows the max level achieved, and then RMS, which is root mean square, and that's a measure of, like, how much of the waveform would be shaded either above the, 0 volts line or below. If you shaded everything that the waveform, like, claims by, going away from the 0 volts. Like, when you look at a sound wave, you'll see what I mean. It's like the dark shaded area. If you turn that into like a ratio, how much of that is shaded. That's how RMS is calculated basically. And this is a little bit more like people hear, but then there's a new modern unit called LUFS for loudness units full scale, I believe, which measures much more like a human can hear. And it takes into account things like sensitivity to the pain zone and above 10K, etc. And it's a much more realistic and valid measure, but all three measures are very useful, and it's good to know the differences between them. So peak is the max level achieved. RMX is like how much of the waveform is shaded. So maximum 50% of the waveform will be shaded. And that RMS level is very useful. That's like a good measure of loudness. And RMS, also when you clip RMS, that's usually when hard clipping starts to sound bad. Peaks over hard clipping are fine. RMS over hard clipping, not fine. And then loudness units full scale. If you're comparing the final volume of two mastered tracks, you want to be measuring in LUFS. Okay. So some visualizers that are great for doing these things. My favorite is the Flux Pure Spectrum because you have a width and over frequency, which you just don't get. It's like most of them, they just show you width and time. They don't show you width and frequency and time. So I love that about the Pure Spectrum. It is a paid plugin, but it goes on sale sometimes, and the older versions are fine. Mira has a few new features and stuff, but the older versions are fine. Mini meters is very popular, cheap. You see people using this on Instagram all the time. I think it's like $5 or $10, some totally a nominal amount of money, super worth it. I really like mini meters. And then there's a freeware combo that I saw a Reddit user put together, and I was like, oh yeah, those are the ones I probably would have chosen too. So thanks. So I linked to that Reddit post, and go give them an upvote and say thanks because it's cool when people share things on Reddit. But yeah, so I recommend the Flux Pure Spectrum is number one. Mini meters is number two, and then the free solution is also dope, but it's like multiple pieces of software, so it's a little more complicated. And oscilloscopes are really cool too. You're probably going to want to have an oscilloscope set up somewhere. And while they are not the most useful for mixing, studying waves will build your understanding of like what's actually happening when you're doing processes, and just help you understand waves themselves. And you'll see me using a lot of images of oscilloscopes and stuff in this course. And also, they just look cool. I mean, come on, how mad scientisty is that oscilloscope on the left there? So you can get Melda Oscilloscope for free in the Melda free bundle, which I've linked in the notes. And you can learn all kinds of things, such as how EQ is ruining your shit. And you can see a saw wave with no high pass on the left and a saw wave with high pass on the right. And that high pass is below the fundamental. So before it's even hit where the sound appears on the visualizer, it's adding those weird sine wave things and rotating the phase and making the vertical swing of the transient shorter and changing the sound in all kinds of ways. So that's a thing to know about, and I wouldn't have known about that if it weren't for oscilloscopes. So yay oscilloscopes! They look cool, they're free, and they teach us stuff. And then isotope tonal balance control. Finally, this is like one of my favorite things ever. I love it. It's not free, and if you buy it by itself, it can be expensive, but it frequently comes bundled in isotope bundles, and isotope bundles are frequently on sale. So if you've ever bought anything from Isotope, it's likely that you may already have a version of tonal balance control hiding on your hard drive and you haven't checked it out yet. So could be Christmas for you today, because this is my all-time number one favorite isotope plugin. I've used more than any of the other ones. I absolutely cannot live without this mixing. It provides spectral targets for mixing, and it's like a range, like a target range of dynamics across the spectrum, and the averaging functions and the way it all works just really makes sense. It's helped my mixes translate so much more. I can't imagine mixing without it now. It integrates with Relay and the other isotope devices, and that's how you're seeing like the additional EQ and stuff that's not actually part of tonal balance control. But isotope plugins will make this like network where you can control EQs and stuff from inside tonal balance control. But I honestly never do that. I always just use it as standalone, and I very frequently will use the heavy bass preset on fine. So you can see broad refers to the band splitting, and you can see like the top of those two screenshots is on broad mode, and you can see it's like 4 bands, and it's just telling you, what the ranges are within those bands. I prefer the fine view because then you can like see the actual curve and the shape. And I just feel like it's more granular and more accurate. I frequently use the heavy bass preset on fine view, but I also will, like, if I am it's funny, I use the heavy bass preset when I'm not making heavy bass, but when I'm trying to actually make heavy bass, I've learned from Woofax that, you could train your own curves, and when you train them, you should train it on the drops only, so it doesn't average out the whole song, because usually when you're trying to get these dynamics right, it's the dynamics and spectrum of the drop that is the important thing, right? So if you train it on the whole songs, it will kind of statistically contaminate your training model. So if you're going to train it on drops, train it on like cut out just the drops of a bunch of songs and train on just the drops. And I use a preset that I made that's based on that method when I'm trying to make like truly heavy bass. But the rest of the time I use the heavy bass preset. It's really funny that I use the heavy bass preset for everything except heavy bass, but these are the things you learn. So, yeah, big shout out to Sensei Woofax for that pro tip. He used to work at Isotope. He's a G. All right. So, yes, tonal balance control. I don't normally recommend paid plugins anywhere, but, but, all right, it's worth it. Okay. So now your main assignment this week, assignment number 1 is twofold. First, assemble your reference playlists. You want to have all genre, all time, top 10 tracks that you know everywhere. What's your good old hockey game by Stompin' Don Connors? What's your Exodus by Bob Marley? What's your In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins? These are all songs that mixing engineers love and love to reference, okay? And you can look up what some of those are. You may find that you are already familiar with a lot of the same songs that the world's greatest mastering engineers are using in their all genre, all time playlist. So yeah, assemble one of those. They don't have to be your favorites. You just have to be really familiar with them so you can learn the sound systems. Then when you're focusing on genre, you're going to want to have a current top 10 in that genre that are specific to the style that you're making. And then current top 10 in the subgenre that are hyper specific to the subgenre you're making. So you might have like a top 10 current house, and then like a top 10, fidget house if you're making fidget house or whatever genre you're making, right? Like you want to have a top 10 in the big genre, then a top 10 in the micro genre. And then acoustic treatment, like I said, does not have to be perfect, but you do need to do something to your primary reflections. Like if you try and do a mixing course and you haven't done anything to your primary reflections, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. So you got to do something there. The more absorption, the better at the primary reflection points. Put some heavy things in your corners. Break up the corners, like have some kind of an object to stop there being a corner. The heavier, the better. The more porous, the better. The more layers, the better. You want it to just soak up that vibration, mass dampers. And then disrupt any standing waves. And as disrupting standing waves can be like a bookcase. It makes a great bass trap, and it's like kind of like a diffuser because it's all irregular, it's heavy, it's layered, it really soaks up sound. Bookcases, futons, open closets. These things are all acoustically awesome. Tapestries, paintings with insulation put into the back of them, etc. get creative, but just like the more heavy, fluffy sound, soaky stuff that you have, the better. And please, I'm begging you, treat your primary reflections. Please. Okay? And those are your assignments. All right. That is week 1. Lots of love. I'll see you next week. Peace.